My name is Madeline, and I learned two things at my sister's wedding. First, sparkling water burns just as much as champagne when you swallow it with humiliation. Second, sometimes, freedom doesn't knock. It smirks at you from across a dinner table. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from. The country club outside Indianapolis smelled like polished wood and inherited certainty. My sister Kelsey looked like a magazine cover that had never been folded. There were 3 open bars, monogrammed napkins softer than sin, and a greenhouse-shaped photo booth built to catch people pretending to be happy. I sat at the family table. My father's affection was measurable. My mother's stare porcelain. A few in-laws told me they remembered me as a child, which always feels like a polite way of saying you were smaller and easier to ignore. We were never a hug-at-the-airport family. We believed in ledgers you can hold. When I needed a loan for my last semester, after scholarships, after a campus job, after stubborn pride, Dad didn't hesitate. He printed a contract, 10% interest, 1-year term, failure clause, not a gift, a transaction. He watched me initial each page like he was notarizing my disappointment. Kelsey, on the other hand, flunked her freshman year, totaled her car, and got a shinier one before the week ended. No contract, just cake with welcome home bright girl in frosting. That's the dynamic. File under, things everyone knows, nobody says. I hadn't told them yet that I was leaving Indiana. Not just leaving, erasing. Hidden on my laptop was a folder called Event Stuff. Inside were job postings, a spreadsheet of faraway cities, and a budget titled Oxygen. Even Lucas, the almost perfect boyfriend, didn't know. He was on a work rotation 2 states over, texting me motel chicken photos and asking if I'd eaten. Naomi, his ex, still floated at the edges like a song I couldn't turn off. Dinner plates clinked, and then my father stood, glass in hand. He tapped his fork against the rim, and the room folded in on itself. He began sweet, they always do. Love is hard work, proud of the bride, a home built on trust. He looked at Kelsey and her new husband, their cufflinks ironed with old family money. Then came the punchline wrapped in a sitcom tone. Some kids make you proud, others just take up space. The laughter was polite and safe. Kelsey giggled. Mom didn't blink, she never wasted facial expressions. And me, I felt a door open inside my chest. Not rage, something quieter, more final. I raised my glass, held his gaze, and said, clear as the sound of glass breaking. Good thing I just got my own place 2,000 miles away. Don't worry, you'll never see me waste space again. The silence was clean, honest. A waiter coughed. A guitarist pretended to retune. My father's mask faltered for half a second, then snapped back. They let me stand, and they let me leave. Outside, barefoot with my heels in hand, I felt air that didn't smell like polished wood or expectations. Just grass, and the sharp edge of a coming storm. Back at the hotel, I opened the banking app my father made me download when I took the loan. I sent the final $3,362.18. Memo, as agreed, no reply. Of course not. In our house, silence isn't absence, it's currency. The next morning, the group chat was full of cake emojis and filtered smiles. No one mentioned the toast, like my words were a napkin someone dropped and stepped over. I wasn't angry, I was done, and done is heavier than fury. It doesn't scream, it exhales. I opened my laptop. Oxygen stared back at me. A line item whispered, one-way flight. That was the moment I stopped hoping they'd ever see me and started planning to disappear cleanly. I didn't wake up the morning after the wedding with rage. Rage is loud. What I felt was quiet. The kind of quiet that rearranges everything without asking permission. I opened my laptop, clicked on the Event Stuff folder, and stared at the spreadsheet titled Oxygen. It was just numbers, but it was the first thing in years that belonged only to me. I started listing what I could sell: old textbooks, a blender I'd bought after promising myself I'd become a smoothie person, dresses that belonged to versions of me who tried too hard to be presentable. I gave each item a price, and next to it, a column called Freedom. Every time Mom called with a passive-aggressive reminder about family responsibility, I added 50. Every time Dad scrolled through his phone instead of looking at me, 100. It became a private economy. Guilt in, independence out. The family chat kept buzzing. Cake emojis. Polite lies wrapped in love language. They had already folded the toast under their expensive tablecloth and moved on. I was done pretending I couldn't see it. Kelsey didn't text me. Not right away. She'd giggled at Dad's line like the rest of them. She'd smiled with the confidence of someone who'd never had to earn her place at the table. I started setting small goals. One-way flight, 187. First month's rent in a city where no one knew my last name, $1,200. Emergency buffer, $1,000. Every day I added a little more. Every day Indiana felt smaller. 2 weeks later, Kelsey finally called. Her voice cracked on hello. "Can you come over?" she whispered. Not the golden sister voice. A different one, a scared one. Her perfect apartment looked like a stage set half dismantled. Wedding photos still in envelopes. Dishes untouched. A dress she'd never worn folded like a memory she didn't want to keep. She didn't look at me when she said, "He disappears." He says maybe it was pressure, maybe it's not working. I didn't say I told you so. I just helped her fold her life into cardboard boxes. For the first time, she said words I never expected to hear. "You were right to get out." I didn't reply. Some truths don't need applause. When we finished, she hugged me, not the stiff family hug, a real one. Shaky, fragile, but real. I left before our parents arrived. I didn't want to watch them practice sympathy like a second language. That night, I renamed the spreadsheet. Oxygen, not permission. The more I built my plan, the quieter I became at home. I answered texts with polite emptiness. I stopped defending myself in conversations I didn't start. I let their assumptions fill the silence like fog. Mom tried her concerned voice over the phone. "Is everything okay, Mads? You've been distant." I lied easily. "Work's busy." She wrapped her sigh in gauze. "You know your father didn't mean it like it sounded. He's old school about affection. We've always supported you in our way." In our way, the family catchphrase, a synonym for conditions, a receipt stapled to every kind word. Weeks blurred, I learned how to move quietly. I sold half my closet online. I took extra shifts at the studio. Every night, I opened Oxygen like it was a love letter to myself. Watching the numbers grow felt like oxygen filling my lungs. Then one night, Lucas called. He had that tired warmth in his voice. "You sound lighter lately," he said. I smiled into the darkness. "Maybe I am." "Portland's still on your list." I hesitated. We hadn't talked about the list. I'd never said the word leaving out loud. He exhaled. "You don't owe them your gravity, Mads." He meant it as kindness, but kindness can sting when it echoes your secret. A month after the wedding, I bought the suitcase. Not too big, not too small. The kind of suitcase that says, "I'm not coming back for the rest." I didn't tell anyone. I didn't need permission. The next morning, I walked into work early and accepted the interview request from the Portland agency. I typed 3 words into the Notes app on my phone. "This is mine." By the time the Portland agency emailed me, Indiana already felt like a memory I hadn't decided whether to keep. The subject line was clean, almost ordinary. "Final interview request." But the weight of it filled my chest. A door wasn't opening, it was unlocking. I didn't tell anyone, not Lucas, not Kelsey, especially not my parents. Keeping it quiet wasn't deceit, it was survival. Secrets were the only currency they couldn't control. 2 days before the interview, Mom called at 8 a.m. sharp, her concerned voice. "Madeline, honey, is everything okay? You've been distant since the wedding." I knew the script, I'd lived it 100 times. "You're pulling away, family is everything. We're worried." I kept my tone light. "Work's been busy." She sighed like a curtain slowly closing. "Your father didn't mean what he said that night. He's old school about love. You know, we've always supported you in our way." Our way. Every word from that phrase was lined with conditions. The day before the interview, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Mom, then Dad, then Mom again. I silenced it. Then came the message from Kelsey. "Mad, don't come home. Mom found your spreadsheet." My chest tightened. "She what?" I typed back. She opened your laptop when you were downstairs. She saw everything, Portland, the budget, everything. She told Dad. This was exactly why I'd kept quiet. My life was always treated like a family referendum. A vote I never agreed to. They're waiting for you, she added, doors closed. I pictured the house. Dim hallway lights. Dad pacing like he owned every breath in the room. Mom crying the way she always did when she wanted to weaponize softness. I'd been summoned like this before, but this time they weren't getting me. That night, I pulled out the suitcase. The good jeans, 3 shirts that made me feel like I hadn't forgot myself, boots that made me an inch taller than my fear. I left it open on the floor, not as an if, but as a when. The interview morning came gray and quiet, like the sky was holding its breath. I tied my hair back, wore a clean shirt, sat in front of my laptop. Before logging in, I whispered, "You belong here." 3 interviewers, smiling from neat little squares. They'd read my portfolio. They asked about creative resilience, problem-solving, leadership. Then the question, where do you see yourself in 5 years? For years, I'd given the safe answer, the one that fit in their expectations, but this time, in a place where I don't have to apologize for breathing, I said. And for the first time, silence didn't feel like judgment. It felt like space being made. I ended the call and stared at the quiet in my room. No one yelling, no one interrupting, just stillness. Mine. Then the phone lit up, 7 missed calls, all Mom. I ignored them. I'd already learned what their kind of urgent really meant. Urgent only if it served them. Kelsey called next, whispering they're furious. Mom's crying, Dad's pacing, please don't go home. I'm not, I said. And for once, it wasn't a performance, it was a decision. That night, the house hummed the same way it did when I was 16, sneaking out for air I wasn't allowed to need. My suitcase sat zipped in the corner. I opened my messages, a new one from Lucas. Everything okay? You sound off. They know, I typed back. He called immediately. Then don't give them the ending they want, he said softly. Easier said than done. Mads, you don't owe them your story. The line fell quiet, but it wasn't uncomfortable. He didn't fill the silence with fixes, just waited steady. For the first time, I realized I wasn't alone. I just wasn't asking anyone to save me. I deleted the event stuff folder, backed everything up on a USB drive, hid it in the lining of my bag. Midnight, 3 soft knocks on my door. Kelsey, eyes red but steady. They think you're asleep, she whispered. You shouldn't be here tomorrow. I know. She reached into her pocket and handed me a folded piece of paper. Open it after you leave. I tucked it into the suitcase. We didn't hug. We'd grown up in a house where hugs were receipts, proof someone would bring up later to remind you what they'd given. But she didn't need to say it. I saw it in her face, the beginning of her own quiet rebellion. The air before dawn feels different when you're leaving for real. Not the kind of leaving where you slam a door and expect it to be opened again. The kind that erases footprints. I stood in my room, 1 suitcase, 1 backpack, 1 folded note from Kelsey. The rest of my life was already packed in silence. The house slept the way only a place certain of its control could. The old refrigerator hummed. The hallway clock ticked like a soft warning. I slipped out through the side door, the same one I used as a teenager to catch my breath without permission. The cab was waiting, headlights dim, no questions. I looked back once, not at the house, but at the bedroom window that had seen everything. That's all you get, I whispered. The airport was quiet. Too early for families, too late for excuses. I found a corner seat near a window, opened Kelsey's note. Maddie, if you're reading this, you actually did it. I'm proud of you, even if they'll say I shouldn't be. Don't come back for me, I'll find my own way out. Love, Kels. The paper shook in my hand, not from guilt, but recognition. The cycle was breaking, she knew it too. I folded it carefully and slid it into the pocket of my notebook. Lucas called just before boarding. You didn't tell me you were leaving today, he said softly. It wasn't safe to wait, I answered. He paused, then asked the kindest dangerous question. Do you want me to come? I wanted to say yes. but I needed to prove to myself that freedom wasn't something I had to build around someone else. "Not yet," I whispered. "Okay," he said, "but I'm here." This time, here didn't sound like a cage. It sounded like a promise that didn't need ownership. The plane landed in Portland under a soft drizzle. The air smelled like wet cedar, coffee, and possibility. The apartment I'd rented was small, one bedroom, cracked tiles, a view of a parking lot, but it was mine. The silence here didn't accuse me, it didn't demand anything. It just existed. I unpacked slowly that night: jeans, laptop, Kelsey's note in the kitchen drawer, a small ritual that said, "I belong to myself now." I opened my laptop and wrote my resignation letter, not to a job, to the version of me that had begged for approval. "Dear old Madeline, you tried, you stayed kind, you worked hard. But they mistook your endurance for obedience. You're allowed to go." I didn't hit send. Some words are meant to be witnessed by no one. A week later, the agency officially confirmed the offer. I changed my bank info, closed the old joint family account Dad insisted on. That single click felt louder than every argument I'd ever lost. Then, like clockwork, Mom's text arrived. "We're having dinner this weekend. It would mean a lot if you came." Attached, a photo of the dining table, perfectly set, an empty chair at the end. I stared at it for a long time, then typed back, "I can't, I have plans." "With who?" she replied. "Myself." I placed the phone face down, and that was that. That weekend, instead of sitting through another performance of The Perfect Family, I sat by my apartment window with a bowl of soup and a cheap candle. The city hummed outside, beautifully indifferent. I thought about the house in Indiana. The silverware. The silence that wasn't silence at all. Kelsey's trembling smile. I didn't hate them, I just finally refused to live inside their story. And for the first time in my life, that refusal didn't ache. It breathed. A month passed. My phone stopped feeling like a landmine. The family group chat turned into white noise I didn't have to absorb. Work was good, better than good. When my boss said, "You've got a quiet fire," I almost didn't know how to accept it. Trust without strings had never been offered to me before. Then one Sunday, Kelsey's voicemail landed. Her voice was steady. "Hey Mads, I got the job. Chicago. Mom cried, but I think it's more about losing control than losing me. I wouldn't have done this without watching you first. You were right. Leaving isn't cruel, it's how we stop pretending. Love you." I listened twice. The second time, I smiled. Not the kind you force to make others comfortable. The kind that starts somewhere deep and quiet. Weeks later, Lucas arrived in Portland. Rain in his hair, 2 coffees in hand, that familiar crooked smile. We walked downtown with no plans, no choreography, just steps on wet pavement. "You seem lighter," he said. I stopped negotiating with guilt. "How's that going?" "Like learning to breathe underwater. Awkward, but survivable." He laughed, the sound low and warm. "You really did it, Mads. You actually left." "Not just left," I said. "I stayed gone." Later, sitting in my small living room, he looked around and said, "This place suits you." I nodded. It's the first one that does. We didn't need to fill the silence. His presence wasn't a rescue. It was a witness. Freedom isn't fireworks. It doesn't storm in with applause. It sits quietly next to your coffee and waits for you to notice it. One morning, I opened the window. The air smelled like rain and rosemary from the neighbor's balcony. No messages, no demands, just breath. Indiana was still there, somewhere behind me, but it wasn't home anymore. It was a story I'd stopped performing in. They might tell people I ran away. They might call it betrayal. But the truth is simple. I didn't run. I just stepped out of their story and started writing mine. When you build a new life, no one tells you about the quiet, not the dramatic, cinematic kind. The kind that waits for you every morning between the kettle boiling and the city waking up. I was learning to live in that quiet. It had been 2 months since I stepped off the plane in Portland. The air no longer smelled foreign. The little coffee shop down the street already knew my order. My plants, 3 cheap succulents I bought on day 1, hadn't died yet. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. I filled my mornings with work. The agency was fast, creative, messy in the best way. Nobody asked me to earn the air I breathed. My ideas didn't have to pass through the filter of family expectations. They just existed. In the evenings, I walked the same route down Hawthorne Boulevard, tracing a city that was slowly learning my name. Then one Wednesday evening, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something about the time, 9:47 p.m., felt deliberate. I picked up. "Maddie." It was my mother's voice, soft, practiced, like a lullaby she didn't believe in. I didn't speak. "We got your address." Of course they did. Family always finds a way to dig into what doesn't belong to them. "We're visiting," she said. "Just a few days. Your father thinks it'll be good to talk." Talk, that word in our house, never meant conversation. It meant control. The next 48 hours stretched thin. I cleaned the apartment, not for them, but to remind myself this was my space. I rehearsed what I'd say, then threw it away. There's no winning a debate built on someone else's script. Lucas called. He was in town that weekend. "Do you want me to stay?" he asked. "No," I said. "I need to do this alone." I wasn't afraid of their presence. I was afraid of old habits wearing new clothes. They arrived on a Friday afternoon. Mom stepped in first, floral blouse, eyes scanning every corner like she owned it. Dad followed, silent, heavy. His approval was a currency I no longer accepted. "It's small," she said, smiling like it was a compliment wrapped in barbed wire. "It's mine," I replied. For a moment, something shifted behind her expression. Not warmth, recognition, the smallest crack in the mask. They sat at my little kitchen table like they were the homeowners. She started with nostalgia. He started with silence. "We just worry about you, honey," Mom said, tracing the rim of her mug like a prop. "This city, it's far. You don't have family here." I wanted to laugh. I'd never had family anywhere. Not really. "I'm fine." Dad finally spoke. "You made a big decision without consulting anyone." Anyone, in his language, meant him. I didn't need to. His jaw tightened, the old storm gathering behind his eyes. But I wasn't the same girl he cornered in their living room. I wasn't holding their version of love like a begging cup anymore. Mom leaned forward. "Maddie, we love you. We just wish you'd done things differently." "No," I said. "You wish I'd stayed smaller." The silence after that was cleaner than any argument. She tried tears. Dad tried authority. But my walls didn't shake the way they used to. They didn't own the air here. Later that night, after they left for their hotel, I sat on the floor in the dark, back against the wall. My hands weren't shaking. My chest wasn't caving. I'd done it. I'd stood my ground without screaming, without shrinking. The girl they tried to shape had vanished. The woman left behind didn't need their permission to exist. The next morning, Kelsey called. "They told me they're in Portland," she said. Her voice was steadier now. Chicago had changed her. "Yeah, they came by." "Are you okay?" "Actually, yes." She exhaled, and I could hear the mirror of my own journey in her breath. "I start my new job on Monday," she said. "They're already giving me a hard time about not coming home for Thanksgiving." "You don't owe them a seat at that table, Kels." "I know," she whispered. "I learned from you." We stayed quiet together, two daughters who'd spent years negotiating with locked doors, now building exits of our own. That evening they came by again. Dad tried a different tactic, money. "You know," he said, almost casually, "if you ever decide this isn't working, we can help. The house is always open." I looked at him, really looked, at the man who thought his power lived in what he could offer and withdraw. "That's the thing," I said. "I don't need your house anymore." For a heartbeat, his face cracked, a man who'd built entire kingdoms on being needed. Mom's hand brushed my arm lightly. "We're family, Madeline." "No," I said softly. "We're related. Family doesn't make you beg to breathe." They didn't have a script for that. They left on Sunday morning. No dramatic goodbye, just the quiet defeat of people who realized their favorite leash didn't fit anymore. That night, Lucas came over. No questions, just warmth. He held out a coffee, sat on the couch, and didn't try to fix a thing. "You good?" he asked. "Yeah," I said, "better than good." The city was quiet again. My quiet, my choice, my life. I picked up Kelsey's note again. The edges were soft now from folding. I ran my fingers over her handwriting. Don't come back for me. I'll find my own way out. She already had. Here's the thing no one tells you about freedom. It doesn't arrive with a bang. It grows in the small, stubborn spaces you protect. In a kitchen where your parents' words don't echo anymore. In a city where silence isn't punishment. In a life where your name belongs only to you. I wasn't just free, I was finally unwritten. And this time, there would be no toast. No punchline. No approval to chase. Just me,